Hey, I was told if I do a story time, that would be a good idea for some extra views. So here we go. Hey guys, what's going on? Um, Found this story while showing off the DVD. I put it in the DVD to take it over a friend's house because it was raining. Been in there a while since 2019 April. So I wrote 19 pages. You can see that's page 19. Not very big. And then I wrote another page, just single page, and like finished the line on page 21. And that was it. That's where I stopped. And I didn't get back to it. I forget what the whole premise of this whole thing was. I read it through with a friend over the phone, my friend Elsie. Actually, this last page and that one little line there, this is kind of how he begins the adventure. So I'm going to take page 20 and that little bit of 21, and I'm going to stick it in the front. And that'll give you, but that's not where I started writing. That was, I needed to show where my, the thought started, and I started the adventure, and it has no conclusion. It's at the end of it. So, a little bit of drink here, nothing alcoholic. How's your Sunday night going? Got nobody in the chat? It's well, here it's 10. So on the East Coast, I guess it'd be about 11. It's not extremely late. On the West Coast, it's even going to be earlier. So anyway, Sunday stream, I was told on, by a YouTube expert, whatever, that a story time. And I mentioned that today I have books like this 5-minute Batman stories. But I found this recently and thought, well, I'll start with an original. So maybe on Sunday nights and maybe more frequently. I don't know. We'll see how they do. But this is an original story written by me back in 2019. And, so forgive me. And if I stumble over a few words, it's been a while since I've read through this. So, and like I said, it has no conclusion at the end. So we'll take a stab at it and do the best we can, okay? Let me move Ant-Man there so that I can put these pages up when I'm finished with. Guess I can put them over there, but might try that. Anyway, shall we begin? March 1913, New Hampshire, countryside. A world and time posed on the brink of its first worldwide war. In just a little while, the whole world would be fighting, but that was not today. Today was clear and sunny, weather not too hot, as in the summer, and not too cold, as in winter. A peaceful and idyllic day. John arose early to drink in the fresh spring air. Today, being Saturday, he thought he might go for a hike and enjoy his day. His parents were gone for the weekend to visit family just a few miles away to the west of their house. John had stayed to keep an eye on the place and that the main chores, that's work, the main chores, that's what we call work, right, would be done. Everything was accomplished except for his idyllic hike. Quote, perfect, he thought. This would be a perfect day. So that was the last part I wrote, but it sets up for what's coming next. So I'll just put it over there. Now, this is really where I started in the story. But sometimes you can go back and go, okay, this goes here in front. I need to set that up. And, you can bounce around all over the place. While embarking down the gentle slope of the old English pine field trail, John Taylor, a strapping, good-looking lad, peered over the high embankment that lay before him. Suddenly, and most unexpectedly, see, I like to get you right into the action. A huge brown owl burst forth on the right of John out of the closest pine, sending John tumbling down the rather steep embankment at a rather fast pace. Feeling just a little foolish as well as a little bruised, John began to stand upright to brush himself off. A creak and a crash later, John finds himself roughly 12 feet underground from where he had tried to stand. Now more than shaken, he stands rather slowly. For a young boy of 13, scraped, bruised, and just a little bewildered, John looks far into the dim, top lit cavern he had just fallen into. No, not a cavern, more like, yes, a mine. Yes, an old mine long covered up and forgotten by the local people. The question is at this point, how does one get out of a long forgotten, dimly lit, seemingly endless old mine? Ah, well, John thought to himself, if I can't climb out, I will have to find another exit to this uh, foreboding and long forgotten place. Here we go, he thought as he left his unexpected ground zero crash site, only to find only to be replaced by no less than a barely lit 50-foot long trek of carved out passage. No one had been down here, much less aware of its existence for many years. That was obvious. John stopped most suddenly in the dark as a huge rat ran over the top of his left foot. Ooh, hate rats, hate mice. How about you? This, he thought, was the first good thing to happen. Since he had been down in the mine, where there is life, there is hope. After all, how did the rat get down in the mine in the first place? And could it be a possible way out of this underground hell I've fallen into? John thought to himself. He followed the general direction of the rat down a side corridor, which was only lit by the dimmest of light. John quickly came to an old wooden hewn door made up of old rough pine slats, just barely hanging together by this point. The door flung open. It creaked noisily in protest, being disturbed. The door, flung wide open, creaked noisily in protest, being disturbed after so many years of forgotten disuse. As as in further protest, the door suddenly broke from both its makeshift hinges, and as John had done a little earlier, came crashing down upon the solid dirt floor, stirring up a century of forgotten dust and dirt. Coughing slightly, John continued through the open doorway into the small room, barely seeing the small table that was before him. John took a few steps forward to see what, if anything, might lie upon the said table. Nervously, he reached out further into the darkness to the top of the table, only to find it bare, unless you count the thick, heavy dust upon it. Stepping just to the right of the table, his right foot suddenly toppled over what would appear in the dark to be a rough hewn wooden bucket. Hey, Shadowhawk Backs, we're having story time, something I originally wrote back in 2019. That's what I found in that Clutch Cargo DVD case. So I hope you enjoy the story. So he trips over, kind of knocks over the wooden bucket. This is getting me nowhere fast, thought John. He's fallen into an old mine. I need some light, he said. He said most loudly. The echo of his voice resounded down the mine's long passageways, as if in response to his sudden but noteworthy demand. A shaft of light beamed heavily into the room, as if from outside. Perhaps he is not alone after all down here in this vast dark mine. Perhaps he would make it back down the forest trail after all. Then home, then no. At this point, John thought, that is way too much to hope for. Better just to see where intense light is coming, uh, see where the intense light is coming from. John stumbled cautiously toward the shaft of light from where he was standing, slightly behind an old wooden chair, leaning against the back stone wall of the small room. An oddly loose stone barely hung in place. Side of the wall. This might possibly be his means of escape. John quickly moves the chair out of his way to get closer to the loose stone in the way in the wall with light emanating from behind. John stretches his hands to see if he can remove the stone. With some effect, with some effort, Rex, Rex, what's happening? Anyway, that's what's happening. It's cut off, remember? So you get about one or two words in, and then you have to send another one if I can read it. He can remove a stone. With some effort, he does, allowing even more light into the small room, which now he could see was some type of makeshift office for the mine. Encouraged by the additional light filling the room, John boldly peers into the backlit hole where the loose stone had been in the back of the office wall. What he sees through the opening, stuns and amazes the newly drafted explorer. From deep within the newly opened space, the light streams across the rather huge expanse, which connects right behind the rather small office space. Without much of a thought, the young boy, he's 13, finds himself quickly halfway through the back wall opening, crawling the rest of the way through. He stands upright again to see a rather odd sight. The light had a rich red glint, red tint to it. This was obviously from the light being reflected around the vast carved out space. Copper. This was a vast copper mine, long forgotten and abandoned, with hints of gold, hence the gold glint in the light. The light was emanating from around 35 feet above John's head, reflecting off vast copper veins in the rough rock walls. The streaming light was just a bit much for John, as it was just a little disorienting, and he had just came out of let's see. The streaming light was just a bit much for John, as it was just a little disorienting, and he had just come out of near total darkness. Something he noticed right away was the feel and smell of the air around him. It wasn't stale or musty smelling as the air was in the rest of the mine area he had just come from, but was light and airy somehow, electric, if you can use such a word to describe the air. I just Quote, I just want out, thought the boy. But wow, what a sight. I've never seen anything like this, he thought to himself. Let me get my bearings and have a look around real quick. Now that I can see what is before me, he exclaimed without really thinking about it. There was obviously a huge amount to take in. John looked behind him to the stone wall that he had just come through. But to his surprise, there was no hole any longer. Setting up a mystery. I know that I just climbed through a big hole in that wall, he shouted to himself, as if trying to convince himself of the fact. This makes no sense, John thought to himself. No sense at all. He ran his hands over the stone wall. He was convinced he had just passed through. He was convinced that he had just passed through, to no avail. There was simply a stone wall before him. He quickly spun around to survey the odd room before him, the odd vacant room before him. It ran about 130 feet deep and was around 60 foot wide. Pretty large to be underground. It was reminiscent of a giant cathedral, John thought, and the most awesome part, he thought, was above him. A huge fissure or crack formed most of the upper ceiling. If that is what you could call it, two jagged pieces of solid stone torn asunder, forming a zigzag trail upward all the way to the very surface, banking right, then left, then right once more, and so on. The light streamed in, reflecting off the glistening veins of copper, which, at least in this room, looked abundant and, for the most part, unmined. The light from above was quickly dimming in the room. It was getting late in the evening. This meant John would have to stay the night underground. Mute myself to cough. Excuse me. And I may have to go get a drink. Throat gets dry. Running the heat, so cold out. Got a tickle in the back of my throat. I'll be right back. Promise. Anybody in here? Let me know if you're still in here, Shadow.